welcome to the first WSA Victoria podcast for 2026. We ended 2025 on something of a high note, certainly podcast-wise, thinking we were wrapping up for the year and going away into a lazy summer break. An awful lot happened in the couple of weeks after we recorded that podcast at the start of December 2025. So here to talk about all of that today, we're joined around the table by our CEO for the first time in the podcast studio, Jack Wegman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Hunting Development Manager, David Laird.
G'day, everybody.
And our Trainings and Programs Manager, Daryl Snowden.
Morning all, welcome.
As I said, last year ended on a high note generally, like policy-wise with shooting and hunting, but the organisation had a pretty good year last year too, Jack.
Oh, it did. Actually had a terrific year. And I'm talking to our financial year, which ends in April rather than December. And in the 12 months ending April 25, we cracked 47,000 members. We had income of $9.7 million by way of revenue. And we were able to generate a surplus of $1.4 million, which is kind of the highest ever. And to put things into perspective, that what it turns out to be on the ground, I guess, is for our two metropolitan ranges, that's 65,801 visits. So that's same people, obviously, a lot of them as regular club members. But that's a lot of trips up and down Gifkins Road, and it's a lot of people through the gate, and it's a lot of rounds fired on our ranges, which is absolutely terrific.
And that surplus, when you look at that, it's not significant because, isn't that great? We've got all this money to hoard away. If we're looking to upgrade ranges or secure the tenure of our regional ranges or to fight large fights like we're in the depth of now, we really need that money.
Oh, absolutely. It forms the backbone of funding our services and what we do for the members. And exactly as you say, it's there for a purpose. And we've spent literally millions in the last few years supporting the efforts of our branches. And indeed, we've put the training centre in down at Eagle Park and the training range. We spend a lot of money, as we ought, in support of our membership. And that's really what it's all about. And thanks for making that point, because that's absolutely right.
You said purpose is it's profit for a purpose.
We're not for profit. It is a surplus in operations, and it shows that, without patting myself on the back or the team on the back, we're actually managing the organisation in the way that it ought to be managed. And that is to generate extra funds, which in turn funds the services, the facilities, and importantly, things like the battle we're engaged in at the moment, which is clearly over the gun reform business. Which
we'll get to. There's opportunities and risk in the situation we're facing now, but some real positives, certainly after we recorded that last podcast last year, a big one, I think it was announced the day afterwards, 4th of December, it was announced the creation of Outdoor Recreation Victoria, which is massive for hunting in this state, and hunting's a large proportion of the shooting community.
Yeah, look, really, really good outcome, and I think there's some real positives out of all of this. With any of these things, there is obviously some risks, and we were concerned about potentially a few bits and pieces. Staff from GMA potentially losing their jobs out of that, and a rationalisation. That hasn't happened, so all the GMA staff have gone across, which is really positive. So that expertise is still there. We've been talking to people from fisheries, and there's a lot of common ground there, and I think they're really supportive of the whole thing. One of the concerns was that hunting would become sort of the poor cousin in the whole thing, but there's no indications that that's going to happen at this stage. So, yeah, we're pretty comfortable and confident with where this is going.
Now, while we understand what Outdoor Recreation Victoria is, you might want to just run through what it actually means.
So it's a new authority that will, in the first instance, merge the Game Management Authority, which is the regulator for hunting, with the Victorian Fisheries Authority, which is the regulator for fishing. But it'll also have oversight over boating, four-wheel driving and dispersed camping to start off with, and with a plan for it to expand in scope. And it really puts our activities, and we've probably spoken about this before, whereas hunting's for the last 20 or 30 years sat very uncomfortably as a bolt-on to environment portfolios or very uncomfortably as a bolt-on to agriculture portfolios. It sits us squarely in an economic development portfolio. It sees shooting and hunting alongside fishing and all those other great outdoor pursuits as something that's going to contribute to the state's economy, that's going to grow tourism, that's going to grow like both intrastate and interstate and international tourism, and puts it as an economic development portfolio that can be grown. An important part of this is GMA will, well, ORV, because GMA will no longer exist, but they will be allowed to promote hunting, which is something that the authorities have never been allowed to do. So it's really important. They'll also have a land access panel established. So we spoke about a bleeped out location late last year where there'd been a battle for years to get access. There's going to be a panel to cut through some of that bureaucracy.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a really good initiative out of all of this, and hopefully it will mean that where we have those issues, they can be resolved nice and quickly, and not take us 5 years of backwards and forwards. So, yeah, some really good opportunities with this whole change.
And while we're with GMA, I think we spoke late last year about them changing their prosecutors, which seems like a fairly dry internal thing to have done. You two did some training for the new prosecutors in firearms. I'm not putting it down to you, but they're showing up at local courts and getting very different results than we were previously getting.
Yeah, so it's certainly the new prosecution team has a really good understanding of firearms. They didn't, but yeah, as you said, they have spent some time with us on the range and they have actually shot a whole multitude of different firearms and seen how different firearms operate, both shotguns and rifles and pistols and all sorts of things. So yeah, they've showed a huge interest in the actual operation and use of firearms, which will put them in a good position. And
there was an anti-duck hunter in Bendigo Magistrates Court a week or so ago who got the find out section of the FAFO acronym when they've normally just had the FA and very little finding out.
Yeah, some feedback we got there was a conviction and a significant fine, like really significant fine. So I believe it's been appealed, but a real change to what's been happening in the past where these people have basically been given a slap on the wrist, if that, and they've been able to go back out there. So I think this is showing a real change, really positive sort of outcomes there.
Yeah, so more opportunities than risks in this whole change. Like everything, there's risks, and we'll keep a close eye on that. And
yeah, well, the biggest issue was, like you said earlier, the promotion of hunting. We have a game regulator that's a game regulator. It's not a game promoter or hunting promoter, and that was under the GMA Act. So for this newer, the new creation of Outdoor Rec Victoria will follow a new act, and under that act, they'll have the ability to change how they operate, which is, yeah, very exciting.
We've seen how the Victorian Fisheries Authority has promoted fishing over the last sort of 10 years or so, and we're certainly hoping this new Outdoor Rec department will be able to do the same thing for hunting.
It's a good thing we haven't got much on because there's a lot of work to do on that before 1st of July when it transitions.
We've got nothing on.
No.
Yeah, well, we've got to get the act through Parliament before that as well, so it's going to be quite busy. Are we going to call it ORV? Is that our new?
Oh, I don't know, unless someone can think of something. But we did have people on our Facebook page, which the CEO of Fisheries laughed about and the Minister's advisor laughed about, christening it the Department of Blast and Cast.
I like that better.
Yes.
I don't know if government will pick that up as an official title. But
the Blast and Cast Act
Blast and Cast
2026. I like it.
Sticking with the theme, and it would not be a WSAA Victoria podcast, Daryl.
We'll get duck hunting in and we'll get some cycling in towards the end, I'm sure.
No hog deer in this issue, but we've got duck season.
We've got duck season. We've always had duck season. Duck season's locked in. The Victorian duck season, as we've talked about in the past, was locked in for a period of 3 years. So this will be the second year. So we can see a regular duck season, which is great news. In the new regulations, puts us at the third Wednesday in March, so the 18th of March to the long weekend in June, so the 8th of June. So that'll be a standard duck season, which we have locked in. We don't know about bag limits. That's the only variable, but all indications before Christmas and a massive heat wave and no rain was that we were going to see a fairly the surveys are looking fairly good, so we're looking at a fairly decent bag limit.
It'll be worth going out and hunting.
Yeah, it'll certainly be worth going out and hunting. be nice if we get some rain between now and then, but you never know.
Be nice if we've got some water to hunt on. Or
Yeah, correct. But, there's always the big water storages and there's always somewhere to hunt in Victoria. I've been in...
There's no water in Gippsland, Darryl.
I just can't talk about where that water is for obvious reasons. But look, we always hear in Victoria, there's nowhere to hunt, but you only have to have a quick look around at some large water storages, and there's this place called Gippsland that I've heard about. You need a special visa to get past Rosedale, but if you talk to the right people, they let you in.
If you haven't got your name out on a hide by now, you're not hunting Gippsland, Darryl.
There's always somewhere to go in Gippsland. The locals, like i.e. Barry, will welcome you with open arms.
And really important that we keep not taking that great opportunity we've got in duck hunting for granted. It's important that duck hunters and duck hunting continues to improve. A big part of that's this program of fully embraced by government, which is reducing wounding.
Yeah, we've been on that for quite a few years now, and both David and myself sit on some wounding reduction groups as well, so we've worked pretty heavily on that. I've been working on it myself. It feels like 100 years, but at least 12 years now. And that message is just all around reducing wounding and waterfowl hunting by practicing, having retrieval strategies, keeping those shots within 30 metres, the use of decoys and callers, and using the correct load and choke. And the key message of it all is that every shot matters, not just, I know we joke about blast and cast, but we're not just blasting, we are making sure those shots count. That's the message we've been putting out for quite a few years now, and it's really important messaging.
Yeah, and it's not just about the social licence side of this either. I mean, it's the right thing to do. And I mean, hunters are going to be more successful if they reduce wounding. So if you practice these things, you're going to take more birds for less shots, be more successful. And adaptive harvest management incorporates the wounding rate into the bag limit. So over time, if we can drive that wounding rate down, and there's no reason we can't do that, it's just some basic behavioural changes, then bag limits will theoretically increase. So it's a good outcome for hunters. So let's embrace it and get out there and do the right thing.
Where do we stand with training for duck hunters?
So we do offer a couple of different things. We've always been part of the shotgun education program, and that's delivered out at Eagle Park. It has been on the road a little bit and been a few other venues, but that'll run at Eagle Park again in the lead up to duck season. We also have an introductory duck hunting course, which has a little bit more theory and a bit more information around the use of callers and decoys, camouflage and hunting technique, as opposed to the shotgun education program is more about the actual shooting part.
I was aware of that. I was really more focusing on any whispers or anything coming out of government.
Oh, mandatory training.
I didn't want to use the M word, but
so the fallout from the parliamentary inquiry into duck hunting, native bird hunting, was mandatory training, and at the moment that mandatory training is online modules. So in order for you to renew your game license endorsed for duck hunting this year, you'll have to do a series of online modules, which are all there now. Before you can renew your license, you need to go through those online modules. They're a one-off. You don't have to do it every time you renew, but certainly this year you'll have to do those online modules before you can renew your license.
So there's no live firing component to assess capacity?
At this stage, no. So there has been some research done over the last 12 months around mandatory training, so compulsory live fire training. That is now sits with the minister. So the minister has said that will be introduced after the inquiry, but at this point, no, it certainly hasn't been.
And there's a bit of reticence with the online stuff.
Yeah, so the modules, actually, they're really good. And everybody I've spoken to who's actually gone and done them, I know there's been some reluctance, but the people who've actually gone and done them, they actually get something out of it. And it doesn't matter how long you've been duck hunting for. There's some really good stuff in there, and it's not hard. The only thing you've got to make sure that you do is when you do them is log in through your MyGL account. Because you could, they might have changed this, but you could actually get onto the website, do the modules, but then it wasn't recorded. So just make sure you go through your MyGL. For anyone who might be having problems with connectivity or anything like that, GMA has got a dedicated line that people can contact and they will help them through that, or WSAA. So if you're having some genuine problems with it, contact us at State Office and we'll help you through the whole thing.
And the videos are really good.
Oh, Daryl wouldn't have had anything to do with that, would you?
The ones with Jack in them? Or?
Yeah, so the ones with my child. And look, the videos are actually created for something else, but they existed, so they were used in these modules. And I've got a bit of feedback in the last few weeks that, why did SSAA create all these modules? Well, we didn't actually have anything to do with the creation of the modules. It just happened that I had done some filming with GMA that already existed, and they were used in the module. So it wasn't actually SSAA that pushed
we just
for
provided the talent. Do you get commission on that, Daryl?
I get $1 for every time someone watches one of them. No, I wish.
And there seems to be a bit of confusion that people have saying SSAA is doing this and making people do this, and that's not the case. But obviously government is going to bring those things in. So we advocate on behalf of our members, and we're involved in those things to make sure that the outcomes are really positive and that we're not putting unnecessary barriers in the way of people, make sure it's achieving its objectives in the easiest way possible. So I think that's really important for people to understand that.
Another thing that's progressing is these new high country huts. Well, not just for hunters, but with deer hunting facilities.
Yep. Once again, really positive initiative. $1 million has been allocated to that. Once again, there's always some concerns around this, and our concern is that a lot of that money might get tied up in scoping studies and all sorts of other stuff. We want to see it result in huts on the ground. So we've been talking to both DJ Sir and Parks Victoria about that and some potential locations. So it is progressing. Obviously, at the moment, all the fires going on, particularly in around the state, but for the huts perspective, East Gippsland is obviously having a bit of an impact there. Shout out to the PV and DECA staff and the CFA volunteers who are out there dealing with this stuff. And I deal with quite a few PV personnel, as Daryl does. We understand how tied up they are and how much of effort goes into fighting these fires. And I saw a news feed. Some of the huts up there have actually been wrapped in almost like aluminium.
Yes, isolation, like the ceiling insulation.
And I saw that stuff when I was up there in October, meeting with the Area Chief Ranger up in the Alps, and he showed me that sort of stuff. So they're really keen to protect those assets. And so obviously these new huts coming in, we want to make sure that they're protected as well. But it's quite positive. Obviously the devil's always in the detail with this, and we need to make sure that they get delivered and the money doesn't go where it shouldn't. And
some good people on the ground. You've seen Mike Dower and Brett Mitchell on the news a bit in Victoria in the last couple of weeks as incident controllers with these fires, but we've been working with those people in parks for a long time now.
Yep.
They're very delivery focused, practical, and there's been a fair cultural change in that organisation over the past 6 months that's been described as a back to basics model.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing that, and the people we're dealing with on the ground, really good people to deal with and really genuine in what they're trying to achieve.
It's all quite positive. Another positive is finally, it's taken a few years for it to get up, but a third iteration of the economic study, the study into the economic impacts of hunting in recreational game hunting in Victoria, is slated for 2026.
Yep. Once again, really important to give sort of credibility and some really hard data on what recreational hunting economically puts into this state. We've had some issues in the past with questions about substitutability. Pet peeve of mine that we've finally managed in this one to get that removed. So basically they do all the research and work out what's actually getting put into the economy, and then a hypothetical situation of, if you couldn't do that, where would people spend their money? So that's allowed antis and those who want to discredit hunting and the contribution it makes to basically say, this economic study means nothing because people would spend money somewhere else. So,
which is crazy. It's discretionary spending. You've got a pool of money at your disposal that you're going to spend on your recreation or your holiday time, and regardless of whether you go hunting or not, you're going to spend it. So do they ask people that go fishing whether if they can't go fishing, they're going to go somewhere else?
No, and that was one of our main contentions on this. If that's going to be a standard question in every economic study that's run on whatever industry or whatever, then that's fine. You can accept that. But this was specifically put in this one for hunting. And,
no. If I can't go hunting, I'm going to put $3,000 a year in a bank account. I'm not going to touch it.
And you saw the only time it's been used is that Pillock, so-called economist from the Australia Institute, trotting it out at the native bird hunting inquiry.
Yeah, and then saying recreational hunting has no economic value. So
we rewind that again.
So anyway, we've now got that out of there, which is good. And now the economic study will be done and come out. So when it does come out, which should be fairly soon, we encourage people to fill it in and be honest. I mean, we don't need to gild the lily on this. Just be honest about what you spend because it is significant, and provide that feedback.
And to make sure we've got a cycling reference in, chapeau to the department, because it was going to be in there. The draft we saw of the study for 2026 was in there. You put a really strong case to them as to why it shouldn't be, and they've listened, acted, taken it out. So,
yeah, and that's credit to the bureaucrats and government involved in this, because we have raised these concerns, and it does show it's another indication of where we're getting with our interactions with these departments. And it is fairly positive. So let's focus on the positive whilst we can, because I think we're going to get into some negative stuff soon. But it's not all doom and gloom out there. There are some good things happening. We're still achieving some really good things.
So the economic study, is it just hunting, or is this one hunting and shooting like the federal?
It's just hunting again. So it's
game hunting.
So Barry, I'm a bit puzzled here why you felt it necessary to insult all pillocks around Australia at this time.
My apologies to any pillocks who are insulted by what I said, except for the one pillock I was aiming it at.
Got it.
Moving on to the main issue of this podcast, and whilst we joke around and keep things lighthearted, it is a pretty serious issue. On the 14th of December last year, 2 terrorists attacked a Jewish celebration on Bondi Beach. They killed 15 people and wounded at least 40. It was the deadliest terror attack in Australian history and our second most deadly mass shooting. The next day, the National Cabinet met and agreed to strengthen gun laws. On the 22nd of December, the Victorian Premier announced that former Victoria Police Chief Commissioner Ken Lay would lead a review looking into Victoria's gun laws. The New South Wales government passed sweeping new legislation severely restricting firearm owners and their activities on Christmas Eve, literally in the early hours of Christmas Eve. And last week, the federal parliament sat to debate their Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism bill. That bill initially combined anti-protest laws with gun laws in what was a pretty transparent and I think, to be fair, fairly successful effort to wedge the coalition in particular. If you follow these things thinking that it's really good that people play clever politics, then you've had a good week. If you follow these things thinking it's really good that our parliament makes good policy, then you've had a pretty crap one. The shambolic bill ended up being split, and the firearms clauses that were in it ended up being significantly amended to make them less of a dog's breakfast than the bill that was first presented. It's still a dog's breakfast. It's just a hungrier dog. So we'll go into that, touching first on the federal stuff and then go into what's happening in Victoria.
Look, I might say something here because I've been in this job a fair few years now. I've been, like most of us, I've been a lifelong shooter. It's easy to say, but it's true. I kind of don't know where to start. I'm appalled. I'm disgusted at the reaction from the government, but I'm appalled because I think not only did those people murder 15 people and wound 40 people, but they did much more damage to the fabric of Australian society, in my view, than maybe they set out to do or thought they could do. The implications of what's now come out as a product or byproduct of this latest round of legislation just kind of leaves me kind of speechless, because it again highlights in 30 years that governments of both persuasions have taken the opportunity to whack shooters when it's really not been the shooter's fault. We're the convenient whipping boy, and it's disgusting that this time round Minns did what he did in New South Wales. He just rushed things through without consultation. The Commonwealth government isn't far behind because it's put through what I would refer to as garbage. And I've got to say, though, I am very pleased that the Victorian government didn't follow suit and has given us an opportunity to engage in consultation with Ken Lay, the review chair. Now, whether there's a pre-existing agenda and the decision's already made and this is window dressing, who knows? It'll only come out once the review is over. I'm not discounting that possibility, but at least we will have the opportunity, as will most shooting groups, to present to Mr. Lay and to highlight some of these things that should have been considered before Minns did what he did and before the federal government did what it did. So I think, basically to summarise, we're not in a very good position. You might toy with the idea that somehow this is all pardon me, all part of a pre-existing agenda by government. I mean, how can you produce the legislation that was produced in 2 days or a week even, when you look at the level of complexity of what the actual bill contained? This is stuff that's been sitting on shelves for years, and in my estimation, it was an exercise in, well, we'll pick from shelf A, shelf B, and we'll mix and match all the stuff we've already got lined up. Complex legislation doesn't arise in a week, and this is what we've seen. So to just to summarise or to make the point again, this is wrong. It doesn't augur well for us, and unless we do something about it, and that can be the subject of discussion, I think we're in for heartache in the years to come. This is not likely to be the end of it, because in 1996, I thought, well, they're not going to take any more off. We're down to bolt action rifles and bog standard shotguns. Well, they've managed to surprise me, and they have. I'll leave it there, Barry, because I could go on.
Yeah, I think it's...
But I'm extremely annoyed.
You summed it up well. We've got some very experienced political operators consulting for us at the moment, helping us navigate through this, and as one of them put to us right at the start, this isn't about you, but they need to be seen to be doing something, and you're something. So the feds did a number of things in their shambolic dog's breakfast of a bill. First one was allowing for a buyback. So it's an appropriations bill. The federal government, as we said, doesn't really regulate firearms very much at all, with the exception of customs. But if they're going to have a buyback, there needs to be money, which means they need the permission from the Parliament to do that. So that section of the bill gave the federal government the permission, effectively, to spend money on a buyback with the states, and that's all up for negotiation with the states. So
yeah, that's where it all starts to go a little pear-shaped. While the government has called for a buyback, it's relied on the states to run the buyback. So the firearms are regulated at state level. So now they need the agreement for the states to run not only run the buyback system, but the federal government have decided that the states will pay 50%, and that's where the roadblock is going to exist.
And you've got states saying already, no, we won't.
We're not going to pay for it. Fair enough.
Was it Keating that said never get between a state treasurer and a bucket of money?
But people are sort of deducing from that the states will not be involved in a buyback. What they've said is they're not going to pay for a buyback. So there's still potential for them to turn around and be involved in this. So we can't get too complacent on those states who have said they're not participating at this stage. That's something we need to be aware of and just keep in the back of our minds.
I think that's right, Dave. But I think this morning I saw either on Facebook or Instagram or a quote from a newspaper that Queensland's said it won't participate now. I don't know whether that's true or not true. I'm hoping it's true. Now. But they have now come out and said they're not going to be participating, which means they're unlikely to change the rules because there'll be nothing to buy back if they're not in the buyback. What we need is the other states that have indicated they're not all that keen on it, like Tasmania and Northern Territory to come out and declare that they're not going to be involved in it either. And then now your buyback starts looking a bit shaky. And quite frankly, Victoria hasn't committed to it, hasn't really done anything subject to this review.
And we're making an evidence-based case in Victoria saying that there is no need for reclassification, hence no buyback.
Yep.
If that fails, and we're not saying it will fail, and our intention is that it doesn't fail, if that fails, we will be adamant that that buyback must be proper and just compensation, not the legalised theft that occurred in WA, where they basically said, a 22 is worth X, so we'll pay you X. Absolute disgrace heaped on a disgrace squared in Western Australia. Not only do they confiscate stuff that shouldn't have been confiscated, they didn't pay people fair compensation for it.
The Westies have always been a bit, well, what can I say, odd?
Yeah, well, careful, Jack, because it's the internet, so the podcast might even get hello to Blair Montague, who I know is a great listener of our podcast in Western Australia. Not about you, mate.
Okay, you're right. I apologise to Western Australians.
Fitzy.
Sorry, Fitzy. I actually meant the West Australian government, the current West Australian government.
And I think the fellows we just mentioned would agree wholeheartedly with you on that.
So I hope to pull the fat out of the fire there. Right?
Yeah. WA's certainly gone to extremes, but the risk we have is that we do have a national firearms agreement here, and there has been talk about wanting to make these sort of things universal around the rest of the country. So that's where, particularly in Victoria, where we're based and is our main focus, we need to push back really strongly on that, which is what we're doing, to try and get reasonable legislation. None of us object to reasonable firearms legislation, but rush changes and some of the things that have been brought in are absolutely atrocious and quite disgraceful.
Well, in summary, what they've had, the government reactions have been premature, ill-considered, opportunistic, and have added insult to injury because we're the whipping boy.
All of that, but that's just topic one. So we move on.
We could do a bit to go through.
We could do a whole podcast.
We use those lines for just about every one of these. The next one, one that's a serious concern, is the feds have legislated to allow firearm licence applications to be run through their federal government system, which is called OSCheck, which is designed for something I would think that we could universally agree is a good aim, which is better intelligence sharing, stopping terrorists from getting firearms licences. I can't imagine there's anyone except for the odd terrorist who disagrees that that's a good idea. Where the rubber hits the road is the problem. So the Act allows for automation or artificial intelligence to make those assessments, which happens in a lot of government processes. And when you consider up to 250,000 firearm applications across Australia a year, it probably needs to be automated in order for that to effectively work. The issue is the Federal Act removes the rights to a merits review through the Administrative Review Tribunal, so the federal equivalent of VCAT, which is something Victorians would be more familiar with. So a merit...
Sorry, Baz, before you... maybe you're going to explain it. Just what is a merits review?
Right, so a merits review is where an independent tribunal, so in the federal case, the Administrative Review Tribunal, in Victoria, that's VCAT, stands in the shoes of the original decision maker to make a fresh decision, and they can do that based on all the available evidence, so even evidence that came to light after the original decision was made. And its role is to ensure that the terminology is that the correct and preferable decision is made. So it's low cost, it's not a judicial process, it's far less formal and far more accessible. The alternative to a merits review is a judicial review, which involves courts and lawyers, and it looks only at whether the relevant power was exercised lawfully. So not whether the correct and preferable decision was made. Someone can make an incorrect and not preferable decision that's nonetheless lawful. So it's slow, it's expensive, and it's really limited in its scope. And it's important to understand what those two things are in this scope. So they've taken away federally for any decisions that go through this OSCheck process the opportunity for a merits review. And those merits reviews that OSCheck process applies if you're applying for a pilot's licence or for a commercial maritime licence, and they have a merits review available to them if their licence is denied, but they would take that away from shooters. And the initial rationale in the first explanatory memorandum the feds put out in their mega bill was that because the National Firearms Agreement, which, as we've just discussed, every state's doing a different thing, doesn't really exist anymore, the National Firearms Agreement, and even if it did, it's not a law. It's a
agreement.
It's an agreement. It's minutes of a meeting and very little more than that. But because the National Firearms Agreement says that shooting is a right, we'll remove the merits review. So,
a right or a privilege?
That shooting is a privilege. Very good pickup. So because it says that shooting is a privilege, not a right, we'll remove merits review, because they've then made some leap from shooting being a privilege to people who hold or want to hold shooting licenses have no rights.
We know from subsequent events and feedback we've got that was just a subterfuge. That was how can we put this across to and not reveal the real reason and whack the shooters on the way through.
Yeah. So our National CEO, Tom Kenyon, and a bit of a coalition of shooting organisations had a meeting with Minister Burke. I think it's worth pointing that out too, that there's been Tom might have been the most public and vocal face of all of this, but all of those different organisations have been working really well together federally, sharing information. So they had a meeting with Minister Burke, and he told them that the true rationale was a fear that terrorists might apply for a firearms licence as a way of checking whether they're on a watch list, which to me actually seems quite fanciful. Yeah. And it then puts the proposition that it's beyond the wit of ASIO to manage that. Now, I'm not going to make any comment as to whether it is beyond the wit of ASIO to manage that, but you'd hope it's not.
I think what's deeper and darker is that people like Tony Burke would happily throw away Australians' rights for some fanciful purpose to protect an intelligence source. What the hell else is he prepared to do?
And would then be prepared to bullshit about why they're doing it in the explanatory memorandum too.
It's disgraceful,
This whole thing on rights, I mean, owning a firearm is a privilege, and with privileges come responsibilities, but that does not mean there are no rights associated with that. And a basic review of a decision that is made, I consider, is a fundamental right of people in this country.
And you'd have to hope that had the government, it's a good intent, right, to run every firearm licence application through OSCheck to make sure that we're not handing legal firearms to terrorists is a good intent. You'd have to think that had they ran a good process and worked this through with good consultation, they could have ironed this out to achieve the good intent without subjugating the rights of 1 million Australians.
But they won't get it wrong, Baz. They couldn't possibly get it wrong, could they, with an automated system?
And you're next going to tell me that somehow they got it wrong with the Salem witch trials? Because this is
I wasn't going quite back that far.
We don't have to go back.
I was thinking about robo-debt.
Well, Tony Burke and his government held a royal commission into their predecessors using automated systems and denying merits review to affect people. It was called robo-debt.
Yep. Catastrophic results for people. So
didn't end well, did it?
Didn't end well, but ended up with a lot of pearl clutching from the people who are doing exactly the same thing now.
So I think
I was appalled.
I think you mentioned that.
We all support the intent of being able to do background checks and do all that. We've got no problem with that, but it's how they do it and that review process to make sure that where they do get it wrong, and dealing with that number of people, there will be administrative errors, there'll be people mistaken for somebody else, all those sorts of things. There's genuine things that will go wrong.
Humans get it wrong, let alone automation getting it wrong.
So that's we understand that, which means that we need to have that merits review system in there. And yes, we need to look after the security intelligence and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of smart people involved in all this. I've got complete confidence that they could work out something that they can protect that sort of intelligence, but still be fair to licence holders.
You could run a good process and end up at a good result here. not what Minister Burke did.
Yeah. And at a state level, just on the review, we've recently, the Silver Report has recommended the Firearms Appeals Committee be disbanded in Victoria. And we'd certainly want to see the Firearms Appeals Committee continue. It's gone to VCAT under that recommendation. Now, VCAT deals with a whole heap of different things, but the Firearms Appeals Committee has that technical expertise and knowledge on firearms issues and the firearms legislation in particular that they can do. And with the people that are on that, that could deal with some of those security implications as well. But we'd certainly be keen to see the Firearms Appeals Committee continue on.
So at the very least, we need to maintain a merits review in Victoria and have it left with VCAT at the very least, even if we can't get the Firearms Appeals Committee back.
Yeah, the move in Victoria from the Firearms Appeals Committee to VCAT is interesting on the back of New South Wales moving, or their NCAT equivalent, moving the appeals process out of NCAT. So it would be nice if we could have some sort of normality across the whole sphere, but different states doing totally different things is madness.
Agreed. There is no national firearms agreement.
Well, I guess time will tell.
Another thing the feds did, which Tom Kenyon touched on, there's a great YouTube video, bit of an explainer that WSA National put out that we'll put down in links with this podcast. So their take on importation is that assisted repeating firearms, so defined as self-opening or self-closing repeating action and partly automated. Straight pull, which is defined as operated by movement of a bolt or handle along a single axis without rotation, which now have import restrictions on them federally. Tom's understanding of that is that where those firearms are still legal, they'll be able to be imported into the state where they're still legal. Let's cross that bridge when all this shakes out and see how that works. Handguns, there was initially some real concerns at the way handguns were bundled in to the federal legislation. They have tightened up the process for importers with some extra permitting required for people who are importing handguns, which is predominantly the big wholesalers. So they've added to the bureaucracy, and they've very, very importantly clarified that speed loaders for revolvers will be allowed, whereas the initial draft of the dog's breakfast was going to ban speed loaders along with all sorts of other things.
And you know what? Being a long-time and current user of the humble, I don't want to do an ad, but it's the Safariland jet loader.
If you'd like to sponsor this podcast, Safariland.
As being a long-term user of the speedloader, I really, really hope that those bozos in Canberra who were going to put this into the bill and have them banned don't think that somehow I'm now grateful that it was taken out, because it shouldn't have been put in the first place, and highlights the incompetence and the obscene speed with which all this stuff was dealt with. Did I tell you I was disgusted, Barry?
Yeah,
appalled. I think
I was appalled.
I want you to tell us what you really think, Jack.
It's just so wrong.
Just on the importation, you did quickly go across the technical descriptions of some of the firearms. It might be worth having a quick discussion about what those firearms are. There's some confusion in the shooting community. I spent a lot of time out there hunting and shooting, and people constantly come to me, we're going to lose pump actions and we're losing lever actions and we're losing this and we're losing that. I think it'd be good for us just to go through what those firearms actually are and what those things actually mean. We did talk about assisted repeating action firearms and straight pull operated.
Yeah. So the definition there is self-opening or self-closing repeating action and partly automated.
So that will cover
button release, things like the Templeton.
So it's anything that ejects, so automatically ejects. So any of those firearms, mostly I think all shotguns, they're all shotguns, which are the 5-shot straight pull button release or lever release. So when you pull the trigger, the action cycles, so it'll eject the spent case, but it doesn't load the next one. So you need to push a button or a lever to close that action. And that's where the confusion exists with lever action. So it's not lever action, it's lever release. So if you have a lever action firearm that automatically ejects, yes, it would be the case, but I don't think such a thing exists. I could be wrong. There's all sorts of things I didn't know existed. So it's not lever action and it's not pump action. It is, anything with an automated action.
And they look quite different because if you want to understand what a lever action shotgun, watch Terminator 2 because he's got the classic iconic lever. I think it's the model of 1887. If I'm
the original patent.
The original patent lever action shotgun. So as opposed to, sadly, what you can see on the docos of that murderer, the shotgun he was using looked nothing like it.
Yeah, so it's not the lever action firearms.
No.
And the premise in restricting those is that they're new technology, which is absolute nonsense. They've been around.
That's the straight pull.
The straight pulls have been around for well over a century. And look, the reality is they're on the chopping block because there's footage of a terrorist standing on a bridge at Bondi using a straight pull rifle to murder innocent people. I'd put it to you, and it's a difficult conversation to have, that regardless of the action that terrorist was using, regardless of whether those firearms were held legally or not, people would be just as horrified. What was horrified was that probably for the first time ever in this country, we've had such a shocking act beamed straight to our smartphones of innocent people being murdered by people with a sick ideology, and that's the shocking bit, not the straight pull action.
It was live streamed.
And I'd go further. I'd say whatever was captured, or whatever footage captured, whatever rifle, whatever firearm was being used, that would be on the chopping block now.
And if you're not horrified by that, you're not human. Oh.
So I agree with you. It's got nothing to do with what the rifle is. It's the footage and it's the visual, it's the optics that has generated this. Oh, it looks so easy. I mean, who hasn't been in the presence of somebody who's pretty skilled with a firearm, who's got rounds off really quickly? It's got nothing to do with the action, but it just happened to be captured on the footage that was sent to the phone, sent to the TV.
But a lot of the focus on this is on the firearms review. It's not focused on the people who did this and the reasons behind that. So we're obviously focused on the firearm stuff, but a lot of this seems to have been glossed over and not focused on. So certainly understand, and I certainly feel as a firearms owner that we are being scapegoated for this and we're being held to account for something that's got nothing to do with us. And these people with ill intent in their heart would find a way to do something like this regardless of the legality of the firearms, or they'd find another way to do it.
And that's the awful truth, David, and straying a little bit from firearms regulation, but that's the awful truth, that I don't think any politician is going to stand up and say the reality is part of the price of living in a truly free, open society is that the government cannot keep you safe 100% from people with evil intent who would do us harm. We just can't, and that's part of the price we pay for freedom.
Yeah, look, agree with that. No argument there, but it might be worth just reviewing which of our politicians are being more sympathetic to the shooter's cause than others, because I'm reluctant to tar with the same brush all the politicians, because some have come out pretty strongly. Now, they haven't said government can't keep the citizenry safe, but they've certainly argued hard and long that the cause of this was an extremist ideology and not the fault of your shooter, your average shooter, or the guns. And again, it just might be worth mentioning in passing that some of these people are.
That is a fair distinction to make, and we've certainly on our webpage, as people make what we think are sensible, good comments, we're putting them up on the WSA Victoria webpage so people can see who is in there supporting us. Another thing the feds looked at that started really badly and is now just moderately bad were offences around a carriage service. So that's not jumping with your sweetheart on the back of a white carriage through Central Park.
I'm thinking Central Park.
It originally talked about things like telephones. It's been clarified that includes the internet, and there are offences there aimed at curtailing any advances in people illegally 3D printing firearms. The way they were originally written would have on their face basically outlawed people sharing basic information about reloading ammunition. Again, one of those ones that would have held these laws up to even more ridicule than they deserve to be held up to now had it got through. And thankfully, through Tom and that coalition of groups that were talking federally and went up there and reacted really rapidly and strongly, that those rough edges got ironed out, and that wasn't in the immediate. The 3D printing offences that they have come up with are still comparative to the changes that were made in Victoria through a really deliberative and considered process last year. The federal ones are still a dog's breakfast. And it highlights why you need to run good process and actually think about what you're doing with these things.
And these are all really complex areas, and they're rushing things through, and that's why they're making mistakes.
Yeah, so the original bill before the split, it wasn't just 3D printing. It was around modification of firearms, making of explosives. But somehow in all that, ammunition got added in there, which is where the fear of the end of reloading or reloading data and discussion on the internet came from. Look, so ammunition was removed. Modification of firearms was around the illegal modification of firearms. So people were like, oh, we can't, post about lightning triggers and, back-boring barrels on shotguns. So it's not about legal modifications, but in the original bill, that certainly got all caught up, where any discussion about any modification of a firearm, all of a sudden you were committing a federal offence, has now got to a legal modification of firearms. Ammunition's been removed. So we're in a much better place than we were. But as you said, I think you described it as a mess. It's still a mess. It's less of a mess than it was.
Yeah. The other thing that the original bill was going to do, which quite sensibly got taken out, was the way it was written, it would have banned the import of shotgun vests or ammunition belts.
Yeah, which is madness. And, I keep hearing the people involved in this described as shooters, the Bondi shooters, and I'd stick with Jack's term. They're murderers. Let's call them for what they are. They're not shooters. We're shooters. They're murderers. The murderers wore shotgun vests and had ammunition belts. Well, you're going to ban pants with pockets? Where do we draw the line here? Yes, they had a ammunition pouch, but it's a bag, essentially. They had a bag. And this bill would have banned things like shotgun vests, ammunition pouches, ammunition belts, and I think it even had a restriction. You could have a shotgun ammunition belt, but it couldn't hold more than 25 rounds. It was just madness. You're going to ban the importation of clothing.
Maybe we're missing the point. Maybe Tony Burke's an old school nationalist, and he was just trying to bring back Australian manufacturing by banning the import of them. Maybe it was a stimulus thing for Australian manufacturers.
I think you compliment him too highly. Barry, I have a question you may be able to help me with. So cast yourself in the role of your average terrorist, okay? Because, look, out of you three, it's a natural fit.
Yeah, thank you.
Or an unnatural fit. And so you can't use the internet now to do anything nefarious to further your terrorists' aims. So you're going to write things down and you're going to leave them in the dead drop like the good old spy system, or you pass it to one person to another person. Bearing in mind that if you're a halfway decent terrorist anyway, you'd be doing that anyway because you know that people can snoop on you. The Defence Signals Directorate, monitoring all phone calls. And so you're going to use the safest option, which is not to use the damn internet. It's to find a way to share the information that doesn't put you at risk. Wouldn't it?
Yes.
There you go. Daryl jumped in as a terrorist for me there.
I think if you're going to sit at home and Google how to make bombs and illegally modify firearms, someone is going to come and knock on your door fairly quickly.
I would think so.
I'm not going to test that theory. Well, not on my work computer anyway.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
I don't want
that.
knocking on your door, Jack.
No, thank you.
But yeah, it's just as you said,
It's
window dressing.
incompetent. Yeah.
So moving on to Victoria, which, as Jack mentioned earlier, thankfully, and look, we are grateful to the Premier, whilst we don't want a review at all, whilst we have the Victorian Firearm Consultative Committee, a standing committee that WSAA Victoria and the ADA got stood up in 2018 so that firearm review would happen in a very deliberative, ongoing basis, so that ideally, Parliament was getting really good advice, but laws were getting reviewed constantly and appropriately, not as we're seeing right now. So prefacing with that we don't see the need for a review at all, except that there's a political need for the Premier to do something. There was a National Cabinet Committee. There was a commitment to do something. We're pleased that she's announced, rather than we're going to call Parliament back and make laws, we'll have a review. We'd rather it wasn't as rapid as the rapid review. But at least she's done that. And she's appointed Ken Lay, who is incredibly highly regarded. You would struggle in this state to find anyone who's dealt with Ken Lay, and certainly over the last few weeks, talking to people in government from the other side of government, talking to mates who are coppers, talking to people who dealt with him in the bushfire review. To a person, they've spoken about what a quality, reasonable person Ken Lay is. So we're pretty pleased that he was appointed to lead it. If it had to happen, we're glad it was him. The elephant in the room is that this review still seems to be working backwards from predetermined changes.
Well, it's almost like he's testing for acceptable options. How's 15? Oh, you don't like 15? How's 12? Oh, you don't like 12? How's 8? Oh, don't like 8? I think the issue here isn't Mr. Lay, because I share your assessment of him. I think it's the terms of reference and the subtlety and the subtle wording in that terms of reference, which gives me the uncomfortable feeling that they're kind of working to a set outcome, maybe not 100%, but there's dirty work afoot at the crossroads with this.
We'd love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got a very significant role to play in this in WSAA Victoria. We directly represent, so people who pay their money, was it 47,000?
Yep.
Victorians.
Over. Let's go with 47.
As our national CEO pointed out yesterday, it's a quarter of Victorian firearm licence holders are members of WSAA Victoria. So we've got a really important role to play in this review and this discussion, and we are not going to die wondering. We're investing in strategic advice. We already have a very, very capable team working on it, but we're not saying that's enough. We're investing in external strategic advice and making sure we put the best foot forward for Victorian shooters.
It comes back to the point we were making at the opening. The money that we've accumulated over the years, I can't think of a better use than in support and protection of our privilege and not having things taken away from us unjustly. This is the crux of it for me. This is so unfair. And anybody who's got a streak of sense of fairness about them has to rail at this, has to recoil and think, that's them. It's them today. Who is it tomorrow? It's just not right the way they've gone about it.
That said, there's things in this review that we can pretty easily support. There are statements that were made by the Prime Minister and the New South Wales Premier that we have our suspicions at who fed them those lines, and I think they operate out of this state, unfortunately. The people who present themselves as experts in firearm safety, who fed the Prime Minister and the New South Wales Premier lines like firearm licences in perpetuity and belt-fed magazines. If you want to ban firearm licences in perpetuity and belt-fed magazines, we're fully seized of your objectives, aren't we?
Oh, Barry, where to start? Yes, hard to argue against what you've just said, but the essence of it, from my perspective, is having a buyback, which is a result of putting limits on the number of firearms that a shooter can own, and reclassifying some firearms which I don't think do merit or warrant reclassification, and the denial of natural justice, and there being potentially no appeal rights. But what's important and to note, I think, is that if Victoria took a dissenting view from the Commonwealth, it could grant appeal rights, but nonetheless probably could not end up getting the security information in the advent of an adverse security assessment. They'd still be denied the access to that from the Commonwealth.
Because of the lack of wit of the feds.
Yeah, well, ill will. Let's say they're competent, then it's malice.
The other thing that broadly covers what we're opposed to, the other thing that's come up, and it's one that as a knee-jerk, I suppose, a lot of people initially agreed to and thought, oh yeah, that makes sense, which is discriminating against firearm licence holders based on their citizenship status.
Yeah.
Off the back of it, straight up, it seemed like a great idea, and you don't have to dig very deep when you start identifying some of the people that would cover.
Oh, and the emails we started getting into the office from people who are saying, hey, I'm a New Zealand citizen, I'm a Pacific Island citizen, and I'm working for VicPol, or I'm working for the Australian Defence Force.
I'm a PSO and I look after politicians, but I can't have a firearm in my personal life while I carry a handgun at work. Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. It's dog whistling.
I'm glad you said that, Barry, because I'm not sure that all our listeners or viewers are fully understanding of exactly what a dog whistle. So I thought I'd prepare a little explanation, and with your indulgence,
I might learn something here.
Well, I wish I could read my own writing. Here we go. So for those who don't understand the full intricacies of what a dog whistle, I thought I'd just maybe offer a bit of an explanation. In modern parlance, it's coded language used in politics to send a message to a target group, usually appealing to a prejudice, while denying it's a message to the general population who only hear seemingly innocent words. And it comes from the concept of high-frequency whistles, which are heard by dogs, but not by humans. The example that is real life and recent, I don't know if you saw any of the footage of the neo-Nazis on the steps of the New South Wales Parliament, and they were wearing black T-shirts, and it said "Ban the Jewish Lobby," which is a pretty overt, nasty, and no dog whistle there. But the day before, whenever it was, I think it was the Australia Day, these same neo-Nazis wearing black T-shirts, and they had the term on them, "Ban Foreign Lobby." Okay? Now we know, because we know what they do and what they say, that the message to the target audience was, well, ban the Jewish lobby. But for people walking by, seemingly innocent, ban foreign lobby, well, of course, you'd want to, wouldn't you? Because it's the foreign lobby. But it's not what it means. And that's a classic, real-life, recent example of a dog whistle used by people that I don't have much time for to influence the community.
And that's, like I said, that's what the governments, the federal government and the New South Wales government, are doing by saying, we're going to ban non-citizens from having firearm licence. And look, the cold, hard reality is there's 4 police dead in Australia in recent years, killed by Australian citizens, with white Australian citizens with a different ideology. There's 51 Muslims dead in Christchurch in recent years, killed by a white Australian citizen with a different ideology. The problem is not citizenship. The problem is security checks. If there is a problem, the answer is better security checks, and that shouldn't matter whether you're a permanent resident or a citizen.
It's easier to stop non-citizens and ordinary people having firearms than it is fixing up the security system or the security agencies.
I think it just plays well with that rhetoric, and at face value, it does sound like a good idea. But when you actually look into it, permanent residents serving the ADF, serving the police force, serving a whole heap of other roles, and it needs to be merits based, not on just basic citizenship.
The other thing we haven't touched on in all of this review, both state and federal, is accelerating work on the National Firearms Register. And whilst we can agree to that, it had a significant investment a year or two ago. It's great, get it done, but the notion that you can get it done quicker and not get it done better sort of doesn't rest well with what we know about large data projects and large government projects. So yes, happy for a National Firearms Register, but we'd just as soon it done properly rather than it done fast, thanks. Because our experience is you can't do both.
Yeah, and look, we're seeing that with the legislation that's been pushed through. Anything that's tried to be done in a big hurry, they make mistakes. They get things wrong. So
can you remember the time frame and the amount of money devoted to it before the latest iteration of let's speed it up?
Not off the top of my head, but we'll put that in the notes.
I don't in detail, but I know it was years, something like 4 years, and millions of dollars, if not millions and millions of dollars. It was unbelievable.
And that was sold to us as a very significant investment and a very short time frame. So the notion that you can throw more money at it and do it quicker, I'm not convinced.
Rightly so. You shouldn't be convinced. But if you take a moment and think, why would it take so many years? Isn't it just a matter of linking up the separate
the problem
agencies?
is the separate states, their databases, some of them are still basically paper-based. So the problem has been as my understanding, is getting the state systems up and then getting them to be able to talk to a national system. So
4 years and
so the question was
multi-million dollars?
How much? So on the 27th of April 2024, the federal government approved $161.3 million over 4 years.
$160 million
to build a database.
Where's that money going to? Consultants?
That's a very good question, Jack. But yeah, it seems
Did I tell
absurd.
you I was appalled, Barry?
I think you might have mentioned it.
Yeah, well,
but bottom line is we support it, but we're sceptical that you can do it quicker and cheaper. Certainly not cheaper. It's very sceptical you can do it quicker.
Let's call it for what it is. We don't support it, but it's kind of irrelevant to us because it's not going to change our lives. And it's not going to really change anything.
So that pretty well sums up everything that's happening right now. And this is, it's been a rapid month. We're talking about literally in the last month, all of this has come to us, and it's a moving feast, and it's going to continue to be a moving feast for the months. And as Jack intimated earlier on in this podcast, for the years to come. We are in an era now where politics is going to continue to have a very strong interplay into firearm ownership, and firearm owners need to be on the front foot and need to be growing shooting to the point where we're making a political difference and growing our strength. And from our perspective, that includes supporting organisations like ours who are prepared to stand up and fight these bad laws, because it needs to be well-resourced and it needs to be done in a really organised manner. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're offering for the government and for this Ken Lay review a really constructive partnership on genuine reform. We're the ones that put up the Victorian Firearm Consultative Committee 8 years ago or whenever it was. We're the ones who really want this. We are the subject matter experts, shooters. We're the stakeholders that matter. So we're going to support good measures where there's an evidence base. We're not anti-regulation zealots. We're not opposed to all change. We don't ignore public safety concerns. We're not obstructionists. But at the same token, we're not a doormat either. So we're going to do what is right for Victoria's shooting community, regardless of how people feel about that and regardless of how uncomfortable some of those conversations might be. Submissions for the Ken Lay review close on the 3rd of February, so probably, if not before, at about the time this podcast goes out, and it's going to report to government in March. Except for that, if there is movement after that, we would expect that the government will move reasonably quickly. So individuals are making submissions, and that's fantastic. Stay informed through our channels. We've got a mailing list specific for this issue that where people can stay informed, and when action's required, you'll be onto it very quickly through that. WSA Victoria's perspective, we're preparing a very detailed written submission with supporting data for the Ken Lay review. We've got ongoing engagement with MPs across Parliament and with people in government and the bureaucracy and our kindred organisations. Ongoing engagement with Ken Lay himself, who's proven to be very open and engaged with the shooting community, and we thank him for that. Ongoing media advocacy. There's a piece in the paper quoting us today, and you're going to see a lot more of that. Member communications, we're stepping up both through state and our federal channel. WSAA National, as we mentioned, are doing a really good job in communicating things and have really upped their game, which is timely and we think valuable. And as we said, we're going to keep coordinating with other stakeholder organisations, both shooting organisations and the broader community. So thank you, three gentlemen, for joining us today for this conversation, really important one.
Thanks for steering the ship.
Thanks, mate.
And I dare say we'll be back very soon. Thank you for watching at home. Please like, please subscribe, please share, help share these messages because they are really important. We're in for a fight, not just in the coming month, in the coming years. Shooting's in for a serious fight. We've entered a new era now. We mentioned in our last podcast in early December about how tides change. Well, the tide has changed for shooting. There's still a lot of really positive things happening, particularly with the Victorian government, but some serious wins ahead, regardless of who's in power. It's really important now more than ever that you get your friends and family involved in shooting and grow shooting, and that you get involved with organisations like ours who are going to fight bad laws. Thank you.